Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're doing something a little different. I would love to do a speed build today of a high school. I have not gotten to play with the high school pack yet because I've been working on my Zodiac challenge, which if you've been keeping up with that, we obviously don't have any teenage Sims yet. So once we do, we will obviously be using the high school pack quite a bit, but until then, the high school pack is basically sat untouched in my game packs so far. So today I wanted to jump in and build a high school and just kind of chat with you all as I build my high school. This is going to be based off of my own high school experience. So I've watched a few other Simmers build high schools, and it seems like a lot of people had a single building high school when they were in high school. I did not. I had a campus high school which had multiple buildings on the campus. It was not a big high school by any means, but I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and in order to build a high school big enough for about 1,000 students, again, not huge, but not tiny either, they just had to have multiple buildings to fit all the classrooms and have them on a mountaintop, basically. So I'm gonna kind of base my build today off of the high school that I went to. So let's jump right in and build a high school together. All right, I'm gonna do my best to talk over top of this. I am not used to doing this, but basically the idea for my high school was to semi-recreate the high school that I grew up going to. And in fact, everyone in my family went to it. My brother went to it. He's older than me. My parents actually went to my same high school. So that's what happens when you have multiple generations all staying in the same town. But I did grow up in the mountains of North Carolina, which is absolutely a beautiful area. But that meant that my high school was in fact on top of a mountain. So we had different buildings for the high school. They were staggered kind of down the hill a little bit. I don't think that our high school was perfectly flat, at least from what I can remember. So I started out doing some terrain tools here on this build. I'm not great with terrain tools, but it was something to at least get me started. I ended up changing that partway through. You'll see as I'm working through this. But our main building of the campus had our basketball court, our auditorium, and our cafeteria. So it was kind of the hub of everything that went on at our school. If you were there for after school programs or for sporting events, you were always in that main building. I don't know why, but it was at the back of our campus. It kind of made no sense to me, but you had to walk between a bunch of the classroom buildings in order to get to this building. So I put it kind of towards the back. I know they have a football stadium here at the back of the school as well. So I wanted to go ahead and try to mimic that and have this building sit a bit further back from the road. Now, we actually did not have our football stadium at our high school because, again, it was on top of a mountain and there was literally no room for our football stadium. So our football stadium was actually in town with our middle school. So middle school, for those of you that are not from America, is 6th through 8th grade. You're about 11 to 13 years old when you're in middle school. And that's where our stadium was, simply because there was more flat ground there and they could actually put the stadium there. So it's kind of funny. I don't think that's typical of a high school. I think most high schools probably have their stadium at their school, but we were a little different just because of where we were. Now, I'm surprised that there weren't bleachers in this high school pack. Maybe I overlooked them, but I was even searching for them and I didn't find them. I feel like every basketball arena needs bleachers, so I felt a little silly leaving that out, but it at least helped the building stay a bit smaller because, to be honest, these buildings were really hard to fit everything that I wanted to fit in while also keeping them a manageable size. We had several buildings on our campus, so this is a much smaller version of everything. All of our buildings were lettered. So we had building A, building B, and we had all the way through building F. And then on top of that, as they added classes, we had little trailers out back as well that had stuff like drama and I think some of the classes for like the kids that were getting in trouble a lot, things like that. I obviously didn't have room for that large amount of buildings on this build, but I still tried to incorporate the different types of buildings that we would have. So we would have our history/social studies in a building, usually with our literature, and we'd have math and science kind of in their own buildings. We'd have foreign language in its own building. And I'm actually really curious to know, in America, it's really, really common for you to learn Spanish when you're in school. I've heard from people in the UK or in Europe that Spanish is not the most common one to learn. I'd be interested to hear what you guys learned in school. We typically learned Spanish and French. Occasionally there were other classes. I think maybe there was like a German 101 class, but I don't think that they had up to level 4 like they did for Spanish and French. I wish that I had taken more foreign language in school. I took more foreign language by the time I went to college, but I only took the 2 credits that were needed in high school just to graduate high school. I also wasn't the type of person to spend a ton of time in the gym or the locker rooms or the weight room. I don't actually remember what those looked like, to be honest. I only had the locker room for freshman PE. After that, I don't think I ever set foot in there again. I personally was not on any sports teams. I didn't play anything for the school. I was a dancer, so I was somewhat athletic, but that just meant that I went to a studio to practice ballet and competitive dance. I didn't do anything at the school. I never tried out for cheerleading. I had friends that were on the swim team, on the soccer team, on the cheerleading squad. I just never did any of those things. So I probably got some things wrong on this build, but this is really just to kind of mimic the high school experience that I had. It's obviously not perfect, but I think that it kind of does the job. Now, when I was putting in these desks, this is really funny because I just felt like the desks that they put in this pack basically nailed it, especially the ones that are kind of grimy with the chairs that are kind of like rusted and dirty as well. Like I said, my parents went to the same high school that I did, and I swear they like hardly ever changed out the furniture in our high school. Again, public school, they just do what they gotta do to get by. We didn't have the fanciest lockers. We didn't have the fanciest desks. Usually the desks had writing all over it or people had carved their names in it. They were really just there to make do and give us something to write on and something to use for our studies. They were not pretty. They were purely just functional. Now, I kind of bounce around when I was putting together this build, so I don't really go one room at a time. I was just kind of trying to get an idea for size. But for the cafeteria, we always had long tables with a bunch of chairs down them. The seniors actually had their own section that was just like half walled off, and you'll see that in the final build. But that always felt really special when you were a senior and you got to go over into the senior section for the first time. I think we had a little bit nicer tables than the rest of the people in the cafeteria, but not by much. I think it was purely just to make the seniors feel cool, and we honestly did love it. Now, it has been a long time since I was in high school. I graduated in 2009, so that probably sounds ancient to some of you, but just to paint a picture of what high school was like in 2009, beach culture was super in, so Hollister was a very big deal. Basically, Hollister and Abercrombie were a very big deal at my high school. But even living in the mountains, we were nowhere close to the beach, literally hours from the beach. And people were super into Hollister, dressing like you were a surfer, dressing like having hair that looked like you just came from the beach. I mean, that was just very much the vibe. I so badly wanted to be a surfer girl and be a cool girl. The closest that I could come when I was in high school was to skateboard. And again, growing up in the mountains, skateboarding can be quite scary. You're just gonna go flying down a mountain. So we would go to the skate park and that was fun, but I didn't necessarily pursue that as much as I should have to have gotten proficient, but it was a lot of fun. Now, scene kid culture was also a really big deal, and that was thanks to MySpace. MySpace was a very, very big deal when I was in early high school, I guess. I can't really remember if it was a big deal towards the end of high school, but definitely the beginning of high school. And so that meant the scene kid hair, the studded belts, the skinny jeans, like the girls and guys basically dressed the same. I thought that I was a scene kid. I was not nearly cool enough to be a scene kid, but I tried. I had the little like messy pixie cut kind of look for a while, and I always wore a studded belt, but usually with a Hollister shirt. I just couldn't pick a style. I wanted to be both. I wanted to be both preppy and a scene kid. It didn't really work in my high school. Most of the people at my high school were very country. They liked to hunt. They liked country music. I would say that I was probably on the fringe of things, but that was because I was into the pop punk music and I dressed that way. And I was always in art class. Like, those were my people. In art class, making sculptures, painting away. That's where I felt at home. I've always kind of been an artsy kid, so that definitely started coming out full force when I was in high school in the way that I expressed myself. Now, like I said, there were a lot of buildings at my high school. I obviously couldn't fit them all in. So I just did 4 buildings for the actual classrooms, which I think is fine. You know, there's no reason to have buildings A through F. That would just be super tedious. I wanted to still give that vibe of a campus type feeling. The buildings are always super close together. There's some awnings in between, but other than that, it's pretty barren. I think my biggest takeaway from doing this is I just realized how ugly my high school was. And that's so funny because at the time, I think that I thought that my high school was really lovely. And I think for the most part, it was. But looking back at this building, I'm just like, oh my gosh, why did my high school look this sad in a way? But I showed this build to my husband when I was done, and he agreed that this is what his high school experience looked like as well. So I think it's just pretty typical for the American high school, or at least here in North Carolina. He grew up in a different town than I did, but this still looked like his high school as well. Now you'll see here that I started doing the awnings all as one set, and I just realized that that just didn't work because of the different levels with the terrain that I had done. So I scrapped that at some point and I redid the awnings so that they are different levels and actually match the ground that they're on. We had some issues with the terrain tools. I am just not a great terrain tools builder. That is just not my forte, especially when you have to incorporate stairs into the build. I just have not mastered that. You can see I fiddle around with the terrain tool a lot, and sometimes I'm just not sure if it's worth it. But I wanted this to be as close as possible to what my high school looked like, and that meant getting out those terrain tools and getting those buildings on different levels just so that the walkways weren't all just flat. So far as I can remember, I think that every building on our campus was only 1 story just because they just had the classrooms and the teachers' offices in them. I don't even think that the main building was 2-story. It may have just had high ceilings to, you know, of course, incorporate the basketball court. But otherwise, I think everything was pretty standard 1 story. Now, I know some high schools do have a couple of stories, and actually our middle school did. And I think when I was watching Deligracy's build, she talked about stairways in schools, and she was saying that that seemed like a dangerous thing to have. And I feel like it is too, but the way she did her stairs, she had like a whole open mezzanine kind of overlooking the stairs. That's not how our staircases were in our middle school, at least, when the buildings had 2 stories. They were enclosed stairways. So, I mean, I guess you could jump from one stairway to the other, and now that I think about it, some middle school boys probably did do that, but there was never any like mezzanine that overlooked a full story drop, if that makes sense. It was literally like you came out of a door and you went straight down the stairs. There was a little landing, you turned and you went down the rest of the stairs, but they were fully enclosed, which I think helped make them a little bit safer. But I think even newer schools today usually build their staircases like that just to ensure the safety of the students. So even though it's really beautiful to have a nice little lovely mezzanine, I've never seen any American school that actually has that. They probably exist. Now, I am really fortunate that I have stayed really good friends with a lot of people that I was friends with from high school. We all went to different colleges, but we've just managed to stay in touch. I got married 3 years ago, and out of my 8 bridesmaids, I think half of them were friends that I had in high school. And there were even more people invited to our wedding that were also friends from high school. And it's just really fun knowing that you have this connection and history with people. And I feel really grateful that I've stayed in touch with a lot of friends and that we've continued to be a part of each other's lives. I had several different groups of friends. I was never really one to just have a main group of friends. I had a lot of different interests. I had different friends that kind of fit each interest. So like I said, I had some scene kid friends. I had kind of my main group of friends that I'm still friends with today, and we all had totally different interests. Some of us were really into chorus and band. Some of us were super sporty. Some of us, like myself, were super artsy. And I feel like that kind of helped us all stay friends in the long run because we all brought something different to the table already. And so when we started changing and becoming the people we were going to be for the rest of our lives, it wasn't that hard to remain friends because we'd all already been so different growing up. So we allowed each other to change and still maintain that close bond that we'd always had, which I really am super, super grateful for. Now, when doing these awnings, again, I was just struck with like how ugly it is to just have metal awnings all across a campus, but that is, in fact, what my high school did. You would think that they would have a better option as far as that's concerned, but I guess just it's a cheap option to put up between buildings just to protect kids from thunderstorms and things like that. Now, going around back of the school, we did not have awnings on that section of the school. I have no idea why, but it was basically like a bus parking lot back there. So walking to band and chorus, you were just walking out into the elements, which seems a tad unsafe if I'm being honest, but I guess the school just decided that it was fine and that kids could just run to class if they needed to. I do have some memories from freshman year when I was in chorus, just running across campus because I had art on one side of campus and chorus on the totally opposite corner. And I would just have to book it to get there because I think we had, gosh, I want to say like 10 minutes in between classes, which was honestly not long enough. That sounds like a long time, but when you are literally running all the way across campus and if the weather is not great, if it's raining and slippery and you're trying not to fall, and for some reason you just wanted to have that beachy aesthetic and you wore flip-flops to school and those did not help you in the rain, usually you had to slow down and take your time. But I remember basically always being late for chorus because I just could not make that trip across campus fast enough. So that is a downside of having everything in your high school spaced out and not having it all in one building. Now, off of the basketball court, we also had our health classes as well. I think there was more than one. I just put one on this build, but that's where we had like our sex ed classes. That was all freshman year. So we had a mandatory PE class, I think, freshman year. And with that, we had to have health. I don't know that I really learned anything in there. We all know that the American education system is a little bit lacking. So I can't say that I learned a ton in sex ed, but I do have some funny memories of me and my friends, you know, goofing off and joking around. We were like 14 learning sex ed. And so every time I think about that building and that health class, that obviously brings back those memories. I would say definitely my fondest memories are in the art studio. I loved my teacher. He was actually ex-military and was very intense teaching us art history and art. But all of us kids absolutely adored him and learned so much from him. He had so much respect from his students. And I think really fostered a love of art that a lot of the students just needed from a teacher. So a lot of fond memories in that class. Like I said, I wish that I had spent more time learning a foreign language. I learned French in college, but I took Spanish in high school. That was pretty typical to take Spanish or French. And I just wish that I had put a little more time and attention into learning a subject like that. I think that those sorts of skills are super, super beneficial in the long run. Now, of course, when I was in school, It was the late 2000s and STEM education was becoming a big thing around that time. So there was a huge focus on science and math. We really didn't have much in the way of technology, but I think that's just because we were a slightly smaller school. We had about 1,000 students, which my husband grew up in a larger town near Raleigh, which is where we live now, and he had a lot more students in his school than I did. But I actually had a very small graduating class. We graduated about 250 students, I guess maybe 275 students. So I knew everyone really, really well. All of these students, for the most part, were people that I had gone to elementary school with, had gone to middle school with, and had now gone to high school with. Needless to say, I was ready to leave and broaden my horizons by the time I left high school. I was really excited to come to college, and I actually came to NC State here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and absolutely loved it. I got a much bigger city atmosphere versus where I grew up, and a lot of people to meet, a lot of other artsy people that were into the same music and art and culture that I was into as well. So if you are in high school and you just feel like you haven't really found your people yet, I would say that that is totally, totally normal. High school is really just a stepping stone. You learn a lot about yourself. You grow a ton as a person. Just keep in mind that you are not an adult yet and you still have time to figure things out. I feel like one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would love to give to myself at this age is, one, don't cry over the silly boys in your high school. Like, you will meet other people. And two, you have time to sort things out and to figure out who you are. I think that there's so much pressure, especially nowadays, on high schoolers to just figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives. I know that my husband has talked about that he started taking programming courses in high school in order to set himself up for his career in computer science, which is just crazy to me. We did not have that kind of opportunity at my high school, but even still, I think it's really wild to basically expect 14-year-olds to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Even with universities, I feel like it's a little absurd to expect 18-year-olds to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. If you take any bit of advice from me, I would say just be patient with yourself and enjoy high school. It does go by really fast. Some parts are more enjoyable than others. I'm actually really excited to play with this pack once we have a teen sim in my Zodiac Challenge playthrough that I'm doing, because I think it'll be really fun to see what prom is like and see what the career fairs and all of that are like. I do have some really fond memories of prom with my friends. I actually went 4 different years to prom, and it was a ton of fun. I feel like every year was a little bit different, and definitely depending on the couples that went with us, that always changed things as well. But even with my core group of friends, we have such fond memories of going to prom together and the after parties that we would have at each other's homes. We were not crazy partiers. Like, Euphoria seems like a totally different planet to me, to be honest. Me and my friends were super chill, and we would literally have sleepovers where we just baked cookies and hung out together. So the whole Euphoria TV show, while it's exciting and interesting, was not at all like my high school experience. I guess you would say that we were kind of goody girls, but we had a lot of fun together and made a lot of wonderful memories. Mean Girls had come out when I was in high school, and me and my friends were absolutely obsessed. We thought it was hilarious, and we could basically quote every part of that movie. I think even some of my friends have quotes from it as their senior quote in our yearbook. Now, another thing that I wish we'd had more of in my high school, and actually it did exist when my parents went to my high school, but was a more thriving drama department that really did not exist when I was there in school. And I've always loved anything artsy. I've loved plays, musicals, you name it. We really and truly did not have that at my high school. So I did not get to live out my High School Musical dreams of performing on stage. We did have a drama class, but so far as I can remember, I think they mainly watched movies and acted out a few scenes just in class with one another. So I know that when my parents went to the same high school, they had an incredible drama department and put on huge shows where the home ec department would make the costumes and the art class would make the sets. And it was like this whole school-wide event. The chorus would be involved, of course, the drama kids would be performing. It was a big deal. When I was in high school, our choir department would put on several shows throughout the year, and our band was a very big deal. So being in chorus and being in band usually allowed you to perform and have an opportunity throughout the year to show off what you could do to not only the school, but to a lot of the town. A lot of the parents and just officials from town would come to see our choir performances and our band performances. Our marching band at least won a bunch of competitions, which was very, very cool. And so I know in some high schools being in band is a super nerdy thing to do, and I suppose it kind of was still, but our high school band was really incredible and something that our school was super proud of. In fact, I think our band won more awards than any of our sports teams did. I could be wrong saying that, but I feel pretty certain that that's the case. Our band was really impressive. Now, because some of the classrooms were really small, I had a hard time kind of fitting in everything that I wanted to fit in. Or I only have a few desks here and there, but I wanted to include some science labs as well, at least to give a science table with some little lab stuff on it or things that they could be working on. That was one of my favorite classes as well. When we had chemistry or biology, we would have our lab partners and we would get to work on stuff together. And I remember one time, one of my best friends was my lab partner, and we were working on something and we kept saying, I feel like I'm smelling gas. And literally my teacher just comes over and determines that the natural gas pipeline that, we would hook our Bunsen burner up to was just slowly leaking, which is terrifying. And he just grabbed a potato from a shelf, because we'd been using potatoes to learn about electrical current and stuff like that. And he just shoved the potato on the end of the little nozzle that was leaking gas and just plugged it up that way. I don't know if they ever got that thing unclogged, but I suppose that's not my problem. I'm just glad that our building didn't blow up because that was terrifying. Now, I will say about our sports team, our football team had a major rival with another high school. And that's because in my county, again, very small town, there were only 2 high schools in my entire county. And so if you're unsure what a county is, basically you have the state of North Carolina and it's divided up into counties. And usually within these different counties, there are multiple towns or cities. In my county, there were 2 high schools, one in each of the towns, and we had such an intense rivalry that we were in Time magazine as one of the top 5 high school rivalries at the time, because things got intense. Our pep rallies when we were getting ready to play them in football were next level. It seemed like a scene from a movie. And when we played them in high school football, the entire county would come out, and it was a big divide of which school's gonna win. The paper wrote about it. The whole police department would show up to make sure people didn't get out of hand just rooting for their high school football team. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. But it made it super fun when we were in high school. For Spirit Week, we would dress up every single day as some kind of theme, and we would literally go all out leading up to the Friday where we would play our rival in football, and we would show up at the football stadium just decked out to the nines. And I don't mean fancy dressed up. We would dress up like our mascot and just literally go all out. So there are a lot of fond memories from that as well. Again, I was not super into sports, but I went with my friends and we had such a blast just cheering on our team. Even if we lost, I wasn't too upset over it, but it certainly was a memorable experience. And I feel like even today, it may not be as intense of a rivalry, but there is still definitely a rivalry in my town. I know this past year, one of the local bakeries did little cookies, and they wanted to see which cookie themed after each school would sell the best, and if that would determine who was going to win the football game. I don't think that it actually determined who won, but The whole town, like I said, really gets into it, which is probably a very small town America thing. But we certainly enjoyed it, and riding from our high school all the way through town to our football stadium, we would ride in the back of pickup trucks, which was not safe, but we were all dressed up and we would be singing songs, and even kids that I didn't even hang out with that much would be in on all of this, and we would just have a blast together. So it's a little hard to believe that I've been out of high school for over 10 years now, and I did go to my 10-year high school reunion back in 2019, which is just wild to think about. But it was great to see some people. But like I said, I've stayed in touch with some of my best friends from high school, and I'm just really grateful to have them in my life and still get to share life experiences with them. So that is the end of my build. I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick tour for you all, just so we can look at it together and I can talk through what the different buildings are. Okay, so it is the next day because I made a few detailed changes to the school. I updated the decorations just a little bit, just to really make each classroom come alive in the way that I had pictured in my head. So this is the finished school. It's quite crowded, but that is how a lot of these campuses are. You want to be able to dart between classes really quickly. So when we come up to the school, we have the mascot, and of course a school sign. We also have some banners to welcome the students in. You know, they always try and dress up the school and make it seem inviting, even though students are not always buying it. So you can make your way up under the awning here to the main building. When we come into this main building here, we are greeted by a table that is probably talking about a school fundraiser. There are some trophy cases here outside the basketball court. There's also some places to sit around, and also some vending machines before you go into the cafeteria. If we go over to the cafeteria side of things, we have all the tables with the kind of grimy chairs that we're used to seeing in these schools. We come up here to get our food, and we can see the daily menu, which is super nice. Through this door that only the lunch ladies can go through, we have the school kitchen. It has everything that the lunch ladies could possibly need, tons of storage, though chances are it hasn't been updated in a bit. The senior section here in the cafeteria is just painted a little bit differently. It's basically the same tables, in fact, in a smaller section, but for some reason that just always seemed so fancy to us when we were in high school. I could not wait to sit in the senior section, which is so funny now. Seniors also had the option to sit outside, so I put some picnic tables under this awning just in case students want to sit out here. There is some graffiti above the trash can, but who knows who put it there. We do have this little courtyard as well with a flagpole where students could hang out before and after school and just enjoy the sunshine on a really nice day. Then leaving the cafeteria and heading over into the basketball court, we have a full basketball court in case people got a little too intense in their game and they ran into the wall. Those were always there for some reason. This is my make-do little scoreboard since I didn't have a scoreboard to put in here. And we of course have a ton of flags and memorabilia from different sporting events. We even have some framed jerseys for some players that maybe went on to bigger and better things. On this side, we have the girls' locker room, and we just have some lockers in here, some benches to get ready, and a single little mirror, and some places to hang up some jackets. We have the weight room, which you can access from outside with just a few things in here so that the athletes can train and get better. And then we have the boys' locker room with some jackets and shirts to hang up as well, but otherwise identical to the girls' locker room. And then through this door, we have health class. So our health class was always taught by a coach. So they have their megaphones in here, a little picture of some sports team that they coach as well. And their classroom is decorated with some sports posters and some motivational posters, maybe a few things having to do with health as well. As we leave the basketball court, we come this way down the hallway, and there are 2 bathrooms here that are a tiny bit nicer just because parents may use these when they show up for a performance here in the auditorium. But if we go into the auditorium, we see that we have this nice little stage, a place for kids to debate, a place for the principal to make announcements, and, you know, hopefully there would be some nice drama performances or choral performances here as well. Outside, and yes, outside, we had to walk outside for our band and chorus classes. We have the band class over here with some sheet music and some music stands. We've got some speakers and a piano, and of course, lots of different music posters and pictures up on the wall, as well as a big banner to honor the high school, of course. Next door, we have the chorus department with a big piano so that choir students have accompaniment. We also always had some sort of boombox in there or stereo. And then I just envision these being posters for different musicals or shows that the students would be interested in, or maybe shows that they're putting on that year. So that is this main largest building here at the back of the school. The next main building is right next door, which has the main offices. So if we go into this hallway right here, you can see it's kind of a plain hallway, but we start out with a rug for the school mascot. We have some plaques and notices up on the wall, and we also have some framed content and some sports content for the school because, you know, the principal is definitely going to want to show off all the school's achievements. In the main office area right here, we have a receptionist desk, all the filing cabinets for attendance and things like that, a big sign for the school again, and all of her organization and calendars and things of that sort right next to the desk so she can quickly reference. Through here as well, we have the principal's office. He has some plaques and things, diplomas possibly up on the wall, and a place for a student and a parent to come and sit if he has to meet with people. The more I thought about this, I decided that the front offices were always painted better than the rest of the school. I think that I'm remembering that correctly, but they had nicer wallpaper or paint or something. So I did change that from just the cinder block walls. Across the hall, we have the counselors area where you could get career advice or you could come in to just speak to a counselor. They have a lot of reference books, storage as well, info on the students, and of course a little lounge area to sit and wait for your meeting with the counselor. Out here in the hallway, we have some vending machines and places to hang out. I remember my friends and I used to hang out in these in-between corridors after school, especially if it was cold or rainy. We would definitely be hanging out on one of these benches. But in here we have the library. And so I've just decorated this a bit more with some trophies, maybe some motivational posters, things having to do with the school and school spirit. And of course, the librarian would have her section right here where you could check out books, and she also has a private office as well. And then beside the library, we have a small computer lab that students can come into anytime they would like. And this computer lab right off the library usually had all the fancier programs like the Adobe suite and things like that. So if students wanted to have access to those programs and they couldn't afford it, they could come in here and use one of the computers under the supervision of the librarian. Next, we come down this corridor right here, and we come into kind of the resource building is what I would call this. It's kind of the extra classes building, if you will. And I wish that I could say public school high schools look better than this, but they really don't. Like, rows of lockers, there's not much on the walls. Sometimes kids would decorate their lockers. A lot of times they wouldn't let us decorate the exterior of our lockers. So they're pretty bland. There may be some flags or posters up on the wall occasionally, but for the most part, they just kind of were left like that. In here, we have a computer lab. Now, I had a class in a building just like this for drafting, which is basically beginner architecture. And there's always like motivational posters, you know, the hang in there cat, things like that in these computer labs. And I'm not even really sure why, but that's how I chose to model this classroom. And then across the hall, we have another computer lab. It just has some generic posters for the school and educational purposes. The teacher can watch all the students from their desk. Down the hallway, we have the ROTC room, and ROTC is for students that plan to go into a career in the military. So they practice drills, they learn different military stances. They basically are being prepared for a life in the military. And so they do go to competitions for drills, rifling, that sort of thing. And so we have a lot of medals in here, a lot of more military looking memorabilia up on the walls, and the teacher in here has a nice little plaque in their office as well. And across the hall we have the art class. This was always put in these kinds of resource buildings when I was in school, just because one, they needed a lot of storage and a lot of supplies for art classes. It was just easier to give them the space that they needed, and to be honest, the art classes were not super high priority to the school, unfortunately, so that's why they tended to be in kind of these furthest points in the school. But this was my home away from home. We have a bunch of canvases, a bunch of work in progress, some sketches up on the walls, and lots of art supplies to choose from here on the countertops as well. So if we head out of these doors and across the walkway, we will head towards the science building. So we have a few vending machines in here as well, a few things hung up in the hallway, again, pretty bland. But I wanted to give each of these classrooms a bit of a personality. So we have our two chemistry labs. This one has some stuff still left out on the table from where the kids were working on things. There's all kinds of gadgets on the bookcase and lots of science-y posters up in the classroom itself. Over here, same sort of deal, another chemistry lab, maybe a biology lab, it's kind of up to you, but lots of science-y posters and storage and bookcases here in this classroom as well. We have two bathrooms here, usually that would be male or female. I'm sure your Sims are not going to care either way. Across here, we have a definitive biology class. We have some images of the human body up here. We also have a skeleton as well. And then over here, we have an actual tech lab that you would probably need teacher supervision to be in here. There's some robotics things in here. There's some chemical analyzers. There's all kinds of stuff. So chances are students would not be allowed in here by themselves just because of the heavy machinery. And then beside the science building, we have the English and history building. This could also have foreign language in it as well. This is probably a geography or history class. We have some maps up on the wall, some historical objects. Across the hallway, definitely a history class. We have all kinds of famous looking people and their pictures up on the wall, as well as a chateau. So this would be memorizing a lot of famous kings and queens, I'm sure. Over here, we have possibly a foreign language class, history class, up to you. We do have a map up on the wall, but some other just things from around the world to inspire the students. And then across the hall, this could be an English class or history as well. We have some old-timey photos, some kind of globe-looking thing up at the front of the classroom, as well as some school pride going on here as well. So that is my entire school. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but unfortunately, that is what a lot of American high schools look like. I'm uploading it right now to the gallery just as American High School, so search for that if you would like to tour it or add this to your own game. I hope that you enjoyed watching this speed build and this walk down memory lane with me, and I hope that you will check out my current playthrough, which is the Zodiac Challenge. I will link that down below. And if you enjoyed this type of content, please give it a like and a subscribe, and let me know that you would like to see more speed builds in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!